Alrighty, it's April. It's Saturday, April the 18th, and we've now officially named this show and the website that we host School News Saturday. um, I did that because who's here with us? Shelly's here. Hi, Shelly. Um, Shelly has no microphone.
So she and I are chatting on the text.
Gotcha. I went ahead and named this the web page because I couldn't remember what to type in on my keyboard every time I was having to type alphabet soup. So I went and bought something I could remember. So it is 10 a.m. and we have a track record to keep for starting on time. So I'm gonna.
Good morning. Welcome to Q&A. Gene Benson. Joining us perhaps by internet and eventually will be our co-host Justin Hart. With more than 10 years of experience in higher education, Erica Gillette visited hundreds of college campuses and has been advising students since 2004. In 2017, Erica founded Rockstar Academics to give students and families a saner approach to choosing a college. Today, she's on a mission to change the way American families approach their college decisions and inspire them to their big dream about their future. At Rockstar Academics, students apply to college with the end in mind by deciding what they want first. As a result, they don't just get into college, they get into their own vision of their future.
Yay! That's so cool. So I'm going to do my news anchor thing and tap my papers. Good morning, you guys. This is more fun every week, actually. We're super relaxed today, so I apologize if I'm just giggling all morning long. Hi, Shelly. Hi, Paula. It's nice to have you guys here. We have some pretty cool news to talk about today. Well, I don't know whether it's cool news. It's big news. So I'm going to actually get right to it. I hope that my next slide is here. I was chatting. Hi, Sally. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We've been doing this broadcast just long enough that we have some regulars, which is really fun and it's nice. So I'm going to go ahead and just start right up because we got a bunch of news and really some important things to talk about today. I'm going to ask Jean and all of you guys to contribute and send questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat because our regular co-host Justin is not with us this morning, and so I might turn into a professor, which would make this less interesting. But here's the big news this week. So both the ACT and the SAT have announced that they are making plans to offer online and remote proctoring for the tests starting in late spring and fall, late summer and fall. So this is a big change. And so I'm going to just go ahead and talk a little bit about that news real quick while we get kind of warmed up and people are joining us. So I was on a conference call yesterday. Was it yesterday? Conference call? I mean, I was just listening. I'm not a bigwig, but I was listening in on a conference call with the CEOs of the testing companies, ACT, SAT, and other folks, and listening to their actual thoughts and what the plans are for the companies which deliver those tests. So this was in the news, definitely. There are headlines all over the internet about it. SAT has just canceled the June 6th test as well. And that was the test that was still open. So, and they have said, and I've got the whole announcement here, but that test has been canceled. Of course, the April 4th test was canceled a while ago for the SAT, but the ACT has not yet announced canceling that June 13th test. They have said that any student that was registered for the April 4th test, which was canceled, should be expecting to get instructions for re-registering for that June 13th test. I'm going to come back to talking about what I recommend about that in a second. So the SAT, the June 6th test is now canceled. The June 13th test for the ACT isn't canceled yet. I'm advising students and parents that they should probably expect for that test to be canceled, but it's not canceled yet. And Martin, gosh, what's his name? Martin, I think his name is Martin Warding, is the CEO. He talked at great length about the plans that they have for how to roll out remote proctoring and some at-home options. So I know that they are planning to be able to do that if necessary. So if you register for the April 4th test and you haven't gotten your instructions yet about how to re-register at no cost, you just roll your test fees over to the June 13th test. I recommend that you contact ACT and get registered for that June 13th test, even though there's a good chance that it might be canceled. Because even if it is canceled, then you will be in line for the next scheduled test. And my recommendation is the same for the SAT. I'm recommending that students go ahead and keep trying to register for the test, even though it may or may not be canceled, even though it may be online, we don't know what to do. I do think that it's only to your benefit to go ahead and take the test, no matter what it looks like. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and what it means for test optional as we go along. So the statements from the two of them were that SAT has made it very clear they do plan to offer an online version of the SAT if schools are closed in the fall, and the ACT statement is the same. So what they actually have said, they haven't actually said that all the tests really said that they will 100% be doing remote proctoring. They've said, should the schools be closed through the fall, then they will be prepared to do that. So the statements are a little different from each of them, but they are basically announcing their plan Bs, just like I'm going to talk about recommending that you do, is have a plan B and have it be really ready to roll out. So there have been some questions about, I've heard these questions in all the chat rooms. I've actually even had a couple of emails from clients about what to do if the tests are filling up, like who will get priority to register for the test. So I put this information on the screen. It sort of violates my usual no death by PowerPoint rule to put so much information on the screen, but people are kind of logging in. Shelby's just joined us, and this is pretty important information to know. So we have me reading from the screen, sorry guys. But the students who were registered for that April 4th test at the ACT that's canceled, they have priority to re-register for the June 13th test. So they will be getting instructions and it won't cost them anything. So just repeating, you should definitely be doing that so that you are first in line for your spot as it rolls forward. With the SAT, if you were registered for the June 6th test, which is the next one, which is now canceled, you are going to get a refund. So you will get a refund no matter what. I think they're going to processing it a little bit differently. So you'll get a refund and you will get the instructions to re-register for the next date that SAT offers. And the SAT is a little bit different. They haven't announced when the next live test date will be. Their statement's a little different, which is interesting. But they are, so I'm just going to read it. So what they have actually done, they've actually said, if it's safe from a public health standpoint, we will provide weekend SAT administrations every month through the end of the calendar year. So they haven't rolled that out yet, but that's what their plan is, to offer those tests every single month from August, September, October, November, and December. So that's many more test dates than would have been scheduled otherwise, so that people who were registered for these canceled tests can get in and take the test. And then the SAT has been really clear about who is going to have priority to register for those tests when they roll out, when the dates are announced. So, and actually have the dates for some of them for the SAT. So if you were registered for the June 6th test, which is now, and you will have priority or early access, which is the same thing as priority, you'll have early access. I guess it's not the same thing, is it? You'll have early access to register for the August, September, or October date. If you were registered for the June 6th test. And then also students who are graduating in 2021. So students who are juniors right now who don't have any SAT scores yet will also get early access. So basically, if you've taken the SAT right now and you are not registered for the June 6th test, you do not have early access, but you'll still be able to register. I don't expect that there will be no SAT, but the students who have priority for those August, September, and October tests are the students who already registered for June or who haven't taken the SAT at all yet. So that's how SAT is working. And then the ACT, of course, they also are rolling out some remote project as well, in case they cannot offer the June 20th test date, which is going to be the makeup test, and they cannot offer the July 25th makeup test. Then I'm looking down at the dates on my paper. So here, actually, I'll just do this the easy way too. So ACT will offer its July national test dates as scheduled if local guidelines for safety allow, and they will additionally provide makeup tests for June and July. The makeup test date for the June 13th test will be June 20th, because we don't know if that date will be safe. And the makeup test for the July 18th test will also be on July 25th. So those dates might happen. And in addition to the originally planned fall test dates for the ACT, which were September 12th, October 24th, and December 12th, the ACT will also offer a remote proctoring option for the ACT test in the late fall and early winter, which will allow students to take the test at home on a computer. So that is just a fire hose of information to start the broadcast off with, but I'm hoping that it's going to help ease some people's minds about that stuff. I want to slow down now that I've read all of that information. I have heard some really interesting things from the test company CEOs about what remote proctoring is going to look like. It looks like the future. And it's presenting quite a few problems, of course. So I'm interested to share some of that too. So who do we have on the line this morning? Let's see. I'd love to open up the mics if you guys want to say hi and where you're calling from. Just feel free to go ahead. I know sometimes people calling in don't have microphones on their phone, so feel free to jump in and say good morning. Hi guys. You guys are all turned on. So I've overwhelmed you with a bunch of information. It's really important information, and I have more. But now I want to just slow down for a second. Hi, Paula.
Hi.
Where are you calling from?
I'm from Southern California.
Right, great. Is it warm down there?
Yesterday, well, for the past few days, it was raining quite a bit, but now it seems to have stalled, and yeah, weather's pretty good. You know, I have a sophomore and I have a freshman. Would the information you provide be relevant for those classes as well, you think?
For SATs and ACTs are not usually freshmen. They're not really for freshmen. So some schools, and depends, will have sophomores take the PSAT, which is the early version of the test. So the big announcements right now have not included the PSAT because it's less, you know, it's sort of less of an urgent priority. So, you know, they're basically scrambling to figure out how to get these tests out to students, which is really an interesting thing. So in a normal year, I really recommend that families make sure that they do take that PSAT test. You can always step out and do it on your own. So in other words, if your high school isn't encouraging or facilitating the PSAT, it's a good idea to go step out and go just register for it, go to College Board. And the reason for that is that those PSAT tests are used as qualifying exams for things like the National Merit Scholarship Program. And so there's a date that is the qualifying test date. Where it's in the second half, so it's in the second semester. Sophomore year,
I see.
Sophomores will take that test, and then they can elect to be part of that, to be considered for that. And so it's that score on the PSAT that will theoretically qualify. So we don't have announcements about the PSATs. And so in this particular year, quite frankly, I'm not sure I would recommend that anyone add that to their plate. But by next year for your sophomore, next year your sophomore will be a junior. So
we have kids in this area that actually take their first sitting for the SAT towards the end of their sophomore year, and then by the mid of their junior year, they're pretty much done. I don't know if that's the normal timing, but that seems to be kind of the course in this area. Is this normal throughout the nation, or are we just a little ahead?
It's a little early because it's a little early. I'm just, you know, you said your oldest was a sophomore, so you haven't seen yet the test results. It depends on the school district, right? So the tests cover material that are supposed to be completed by the end of junior year. So especially related to the math and stuff, the earlier a student takes it, the less likely they're going to have been exposed, especially to the trigonometry. Trigonometry is the content that is often not finished at the end of senior year or at the end of junior year for some students. So the reason to delay taking it is if your school curriculum hasn't covered all of that stuff. So if you've got students who are, as a rule, so in your district, right? If you're in a school district that's moving students up through the math curriculum, and they're doing fine, then that's great. You know, if you take it in the end of your sophomore year and then you take it at the end of your junior year, you've got a whole extra year of just general academic maturity that will likely produce higher scores, right? So if you take it early and your score is good, then when you take it at the end of your junior year, it's likely going to be even better. So I've never had a student with that circumstance, but I would definitely recommend Paula that she take it again, unless she gets a perfect score. But that's pretty far in the future, I hope.
Shelley Dodd there is calling us from Seattle. She's a junior in high school. Unfortunately, Shelley has no microphone, so we're gonna text. You'll have to answer her questions.
Cool. Hi, Shelley. So Jean's here and he just told me, but I didn't catch all of that. But we've got Shelley and she's got a question, but she doesn't have a microphone, Paula. So I'm gonna let Jean tell me what her question is.
She hasn't given it to me yet.
But she hasn't given it to us yet. Okay, got it. So Paula, what district are you in Southern California?
We're in the San Bernardino County. It's Chafee Joint Union High School District. And we seem to have a lot of just these hyper Asian kids in this district, and they usually sit for their first SAT right around the end of their sophomore year or even the beginning of their junior year, and then towards like spring junior year, they're pretty much done if they need to take another administration. But otherwise, like junior year, the first month or two, they're set. And then it's all about application process from that point forward. And if that's the timeline, my kid is really, really late. We haven't prepared. We haven't looked into any of that stuff. So yeah, I was a little shocked because I noticed my cousin who's in the same, who has a son in the same age, they're a little behind, or maybe we're just a little forward. But yeah, and one of the concerns I had was, you know, since the cancellations of these SAT administrations, how does that affect incoming juniors, not the juniors that are now juniors, but the sophomores that are going to be juniors in the fall? How do they sign up? Especially if there's a lot of juniors already that haven't even sat through their first administration and will be applying to colleges in the fall. That's another concern to me as well. I mean, if we're probably going to be booted out many a times before we can get accommodated. Is that what you're finding too, or what you think?
Paula, thank you so much for all this information. It makes for a good conversation. There are a couple interesting things. So like I said, students who are sophomore now. So actually, I could just go over the timeline. Maybe I will start with the timeline. I wish I had my slide that I share a lot with the timeline. So if we back up from when college applications are due, and we start there, it'll help make sense of this, right? So in fact, I have my handy little thing. So college applications, as a general rule, they're due by Christmas, right? So Christmas when you're a senior. So senior Christmas. So senior Christmas. I can't remember. Is this going to be backwards? Is it readable on the screen? Or is it backwards to you guys?
No, that's good for them.
Okay. So senior year Christmas is when you want to have your applications done by. Lots of applications are not technically due until January or February. But the most competitive ones are due even way before that. So real competitive applications, including Ivy Leagues and including early decision, are actually due before Thanksgiving. So by the end of your senior year Christmas, you are mostly done. So in order to get that done, you need to have a best test score. You have to have your very best test scores finished in before Thanksgiving. So best test before Thanksgiving. Okay. So I'm making a little timeline. So your best test score, you got to have it done by Thanksgiving of your senior year. I don't let my clients wait anywhere near that long, Paula. So basically, we're about to get to your timeline is really close to correct. So if you've got your best test score, your last chance to get your best test score is sort of before Thanksgiving. And then you probably want to have taken your first test quite a long time before that, right? So I work privately. So a little background, I work privately with families and high school students on the application process. I don't do the relationship management with the schools. I just work with the students to figure out what they want to do and do the applications. So when I say my clients, I mean the students I work with. I like to have them done with all the work of applying before they even go back for the beginning of their senior year. So, September. So by senior September, done with their tests. So I like for their best tests to be done in the summer. So that means, in order to get the senior, oh, you got that light on. So in order to have your best tests done by the time you go back to school in September, that means you got to be focusing on it during the summer between your junior and senior year. So that's your latest time. So Paula, in your district, what they're doing is they're actually backing that process up quite a bit, almost a year. If they're working on their best test scores in their before their junior September, right? That's really early. It's not bad to be early. And so if you got really high achieving demographics in your school district and those students are getting high enough scores to get it out of the way, that's great, because it means you can focus on doing all these other great things with your life in that other semester, right? So in the summer between your junior and senior year, you're not studying for the ACT or the SAT. That means you could be leading your robotics team or going on a church mission or doing an internship somewhere. So it's great if you can score a target score early, then it means you can focus on other things. But your question was, are we behind? And so my answer is, you're not behind at all. And given what's happening in the world, I wouldn't even, if I had a sophomore right now, I wouldn't even want to be getting in the mess, right? So because you're not late, because it's early, I mean, I wouldn't even get in the mess. Because as I started the show off with, and as I've talked about for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to talk more about it, it's total chaos right now. So if you don't have to get in the mess of them working out crazy at-home technology, and you don't have to get in the mess of whether or not those test scores are going to actually be credible and valid, which I make the frown, because it's it's upsetting to think that students who are juniors now, who are going to have to take one of these at-home proctored exams, that's going to be their best chance, and they got to go do it. They've got to go do it because it's what they've got. But we don't know what that's going to look like. We don't know if it's going to be effective. We don't know if it's going to be a election day scandal about were they credible, were they trustworthy. If I were you, I would just wait and see on those tests, because you don't need them this year.
Okay.
Does that make sense? That was a kind of long-winded answer.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. If there's another question behind it, just let me know.
So similar to that, I have a junior. She was supposed to take the SAT on June 6th, and
Yep.
it obviously is canceled. And that was gonna be her first time taking the SAT. And now we're in the Bay Area in California, and we're hearing like the UCs are not going to be requiring SATs, And some of the private schools, Harvard is one of them. She wasn't going to apply to Harvard, but we're hearing that Harvard and some other like large type universities, Ivy Leagues, are not going to be requiring it. Now I'm really wondering, does it even make sense for her to get involved with the chaos and study over the summer? And if it's just going to be thrown away or not looked at or just not even considered for the application process. I'm just trying to weigh, is it better to put that towards like community service or extracurriculars, or should she just go along and just deal with it and study for it and do the best she can and hope that it's included in the admission process?
It's an awesome question. Saying awesome is sort of like the word of the week. It's not awesome. Like, oh, this sucks, actually, to be honest, Shelby. But you're asking the right question, which is it worth it? So about half, something like, is it half? I don't know if it's half right now. I don't want to speak out of turn. I'll show you in a minute. My very next slide is a slide about where do you get all this information. So I will show you guys that slide with the address. But many, maybe half, maybe it will be easily be half by the time we're done with this. Schools are announcing that they're going test optional. And the reason for that is that the credibility of these tests that might be administered online is still to be determined. One, there are huge access issues and inequality issues related to delivering the standardized test online, because something like 12% of American high school students don't have internet at home. So, they don't have internet access to access review materials, much less internet access to access the test itself. So the test makers have made have talked at great length, for example, on the conference call yesterday, about how they're going to handle that access problem. But the point is, for this year and probably for next year's, there's some serious issues about that test. So they're saying, look, this is test optional because we understand that there is a huge percentage of the population who is going to be handicapped by the situation. So what does test optional mean? This question, I'm answering this question a couple of times a day. So your question, Shelby, I appreciate you giving me a chance to answer it again. Test optional, it doesn't mean they aren't going to look at the tests, right? It means that they are going to be flexible and understanding if you don't have a test score. So if you do have a test score, so I get the question a lot, as one of the questions I answered yesterday. So one of the questions I get all the time is, what if we have an average test score already? If the school's test optional, should I submit an average score? Or what if I don't have a test? So if you have an amazing score, like one of my clients who just got the announcement that he got a 35 on the test that he took last month. That's almost perfect, right? So that's awesome. So he needs to definitely submit that score to every school, right? Because even though they're test optional, they're still going to look at everything you report to them. So if you report to them that you've got a great test score, it can't hurt you and it can only help you. And it can help you a lot in a year where there may be fewer applicants, there may be all kinds of, unusual circumstances, et cetera. So what I'm telling families in answer to your question is, if you have the ability to take the test and you think you have the ability to do well on the test, even to do average on the test, you should go ahead and do what you can to get a test taken. So obviously we all have all these other priorities, right, that are more important, that need to take precedence. And that's why the schools are saying, hey, look, if you don't have a score or if you have a low score, we're not going to look at that. We're not going to penalize you for an absent score or a low score. We're going to then, what happens then is that everything else in your application matters more, right? So it matters more that you have a great essay, and it matters more that you have taken the time to talk about your extracurricular activities and, really good grades on your transcript. All those things will matter way more because the test score isn't present, or the test score was obviously needed to be thrown out. But if you have the ability to accomplish a good test score, you should do it. You should do it. You should even take the risk of the online test, which might be weird or full of glitches, or maybe it gets thrown out because it's determined to be unreliable. Doesn't matter. You should still be in the room, right? Because it can only help you, it can't hurt you. There's no way that it could hurt you. It could only be that the test scores are valid and you did well and it helps your case. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what would you, for SAT, what would you say is like the threshold for having like a quote unquote decent score? At what point is your score so bad that you're like, oh, this is gonna hurt you?
Well, so I'm gonna resume sharing my screen, and I'm gonna scroll down to, I'll come back to that one. Where's my slide? So you guys looking at the slide that has the address on it? And so Shelby, the reason I do this is I'm going to show you that website because so this is our new news page, School News Saturday. At the bottom of this page are hundreds of links to the information that you guys need. So I can now just say, go look at schoolnewssaturday.com. And so what you can do is you can go to one of the college search sites. There are tons of them. College Board has a great one called Big Future. The one I like the best is really data oriented. It's called collegedata.com. And so it depends entirely on the schools that you want to apply to. So what you want to do is, a good score is a score that lands your student in the middle 50% of their requirements. So, and I might do a tutorial video on this and release it on the channel where these are to sort of explain how this works, right? But schools will announce the data about their previous year's admitted class. So basically we'll say, like, last year, 50% of the students we accepted had ACT or SAT scores between X and Y. So that's the sort of middle 50%. And that's your guideline for what's a good score at that school. So you have that piece of information, and then you have the first test that your student took. So you just got to go take the test or take a practice test and see kind of where you're going to fall. And then you can improve that score. It's really easy to improve your score for most students, a sum, right? So whatever that score is, it's very easy to do some preparation and bring that score up some. And then you are able to match your score with what schools that's the middle 50%. Does that make sense? So it's hard to say, right? I mean, state schools, our state school, I'm in Reno, Lake Tahoe, so we're in Nevada, and our state school, sort of the middle is, the range is like 20 to 25. Ivy League schools are much, much higher than that. Those are ACT scores, sorry. But what you want to do is you want to look at the schools you're considering. And another resource that's at School News Saturday as well is something called a concordance table, which will tell you what is the equivalent of a 750 on the ACT. Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I wish there were a really easy answer. I could just give everybody a number, say, well, a 21 will get you into the University of Nevada, but it won't touch, UCLA, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Oh, it's good to have people here asking questions. That's nice. Shelley had a question. Did we get Shelley's question yet? We're good for the moment. Cool. Well, I actually have a couple things I want to talk about this morning. So sort of the theme of the day was having a backup plan, right? Actually, so making a backup plan is our theme. And the reason for that is that, let me not give you guys all motion sickness, but the reason for that, of course, is that plans are changing everywhere. Plans for students are changing, plans for colleges are changing, all the information is changing, tests are being canceled, everything is totally up in the air. And so last week, my co-host Justin said, we've been laughing about this all week. He said, so Erica, are we gonna be able to get some clarity from the colleges soon about what's happening? And I just said, nope, no clarity. And so therefore, since there's not going to be a lot of clarity and things are going to continue to change, it's really important that we talk about what a backup plan looks like, right? This slide that I'm showing you is several weeks old. The latest version of this survey now is like more like 1 in 4 instead of 1 of 6 students and families are rethinking their plans for all these various other options, because who wants their kid to be 3,000 miles away when all of a sudden campus is closed? And I've had a couple of really hard conversations with clients this week about, gosh, my son or my daughter has gotten all these scholarship offers to these great schools, but they're really far away from home. And we don't know if we want our student to be that far away from home if something like this happens again. And also, we had a 529 that was invested in the stock market, and it's not worth as much as we thought it was, and we can't afford Wesleyan anymore, right? So people are changing their plans. And so what I wanted to talk about today was, what does it look like to have a backup plan? And what kind of information do you need to be paying attention to so that you have a good backup plan? So that's my theme. My theme of the day right now is, when approaching college, you really need to be prepared, right? And being prepared includes being well informed. So one thing that surprised a student of mine this week was that, all the talk about how colleges have extended their deadlines, and deadlines right now, we're coming up on May 1st is traditionally the deadline for accepting the offer and telling the schools where you've decided to go. So we call it deadline day or deposit day, decision day. And that's May 1st for most schools. In fact, in an average year, it's May 1st for every school. It's the same deadline for everyone. And about 50%, 52% of schools have moved that deadline right now from decisions don't have to be made in 2 weeks anymore. They will have to be made at the end of June. So those deadlines have changed, but 52% change means 48% of schools are still expecting you to decide by the end of the month. And so if you're a senior and you are thinking about where you're going to go, you need to check your school's deadline to make sure that you don't miss it because you assumed it had been moved like everybody else's. So again, at School News Saturday, there is also a link down at the bottom where the NACAC, which is the National Association of College Admissions Counselors, of course, they have a list where you can just go check the list to see whether your school has moved their deadline or not. So that's one way that's very important to be prepared. Also, of course, making a plan B and making sure that you've applied to the plan B school. So I'm just curious, so all the folks here, we know that, I know that Shelly's daughter is a sophomore, and Polly, you said so I guess what I want to know is, does anybody on the call have a senior right now? Because I was talking to a client this week who is a senior, and we were talking about what is your plan B going to be if he's gotten into schools on the East Coast, and he has gotten into some really great private schools, and did he apply to a school that would be a good plan B in case everything changes? And so some schools are still accepting applications right now for seniors. And it might be that you would want to apply to your plan B school now, even though you thought you were surely going to Vanderbilt, but maybe you want to get an application in at your state school. Because a lot of families are looking at in-state tuition and in-state travel commitments and things like that. And that's what they want to do instead. So making sure that your plan B is doable and planning to expect changes. So things that we don't know are going to change. We have no idea what online classes might look like. So last week I talked a lot about evaluating the school you choose given the new circumstance. So what do you evaluate schools on now? And I'm going to actually offer, for those of you, I'm going to put together a checklist, a PDF of the 7 things I talked about last week, the things to look at. So, on-time graduation rate, online learning, history, whether they were doing it well 3 years ago, they're probably going to do it better next year than schools that are just rolling it out for the first time. So planning for things to be unexpected and to be flexible and I'm going to talk about questions you might want to ask. But before I go into planning for the worst, there's this line here that I think is really important to talk about, which is also, are you planning for the best thing to happen? Because, only planning for the worst thing to happen could mean that you aren't taking you're not taking an SAT, which wouldn't be the right thing to do, right? You should plan for things to maybe be normal. So go ahead and take that test in case things are normal. Go ahead and do well in school and be doing your best and assuming that you're going to be able to go to college on time, because that might happen. It's very likely that the whole system is going to get their act together enough that an option is going to be available for you. But if you haven't been planning, and you haven't been planning to be able to take the option, then you're going to be left out, right? So planning for the best possible scenario. So those are some things to consider with Plan B, and so many more. Let's see. We're halfway in, and I haven't given you guys a couple of web addresses that I want to share. So I'm going to do that and give everybody a chance to take a break, huh? Let's see. Let's get to my slide that has so as this loads, one of the things I'm going to offer you guys this week, this is this link that's here at the bottom of the screen just takes you to my calendar. So I've had a really wonderful time the last 5 weeks talking to families afterwards who have set up time with me to talk one-on-one. It's been really great to hear from families all over the country and hear how things are different in different places. And so I'm going to invite you guys all to go visit my calendar. You go to this Rockstar strategy sessions and it takes you to a page that looks like this, and you just pick a time that works. And we'll talk about your family situation and real specific questions. But very specifically, what I want to offer is that during that time that we might talk on the phone, we can actually audit the schools that you're considering. So looking at that handout that I talked about, looking at these things that are the questions you should be asking a school before you enroll, looking at those specific things can be confusing for someone who doesn't look at those numbers all the time. So evaluating the academic and financial health of an institution and seeing how they sort of rank up against other choices considering the new reality. So we can do that one-on-one. You can bring a couple of schools that you're serious about, and we can evaluate them together. This is one of the things that we could do at this time. So I want to put that up before we run out of time, so you guys have a chance. And maybe would you put rockstarstrategysessions.com in the chat so you can just click and you can go schedule right this minute if you want to. So then that address will be there for you. So I try to remember to take a deep breath from time to time so you guys have a chance to think a little bit. We had stormy snow here last night, and now it's beautiful again outside at Lake Tahoe. So one of the questions I get all the time is, why wouldn't students just defer their admission and just take a gap year? So if we look back at that slide I shared with you at the beginning, what are families actually considering, right? So if they're planning to change their plan, if they're thinking about changing their plans, what are they going to do instead? And everybody talks about a gap year. Maybe I'll just take the year off. Maybe I'm going to enroll at community college instead, or go to my local state school but work part-time. And so what does that mean? And I've had a lot of high school students say, well, I hear that I can just defer my admission and I'll just tell them I'm coming next year and we're going to wait and see. So this is it doesn't really work like that. And so I think it's important to let you guys know that way in advance. So you don't planning on just if you were to get into Claremont College and then just call them and say, hey, I'm coming next year. What a gap year is, and I heard a really good explanation of it from a former admissions officer this week. So I'm kind of going to repeat what I heard. But a gap year is a kind of a special circumstance where you've gotten into a school and you have a plan for something that you want to do in the gap year. So for example, you're going to go on a church mission, or you're going to join AmeriCorps for a year because you have a thing that you want to do, or you have an internship that you've been offered that you'd like to do before you go to school. And when you apply for an actual gap year deferment, you apply for it and you talk to the school about the plans that you have, and they accept your application or not. So most of the time schools get 20 of these applications a year. So it's easy for them to approve students who have a good plan for what they're going to do with the year. But what they don't approve is just staying home or just, taking classes at the community college instead. So if you want to do an official gap year and have a school hold your spot for you, you're making an application that's similar to your actual application to the school in the first place and saying, here's why I want this time. And the thing is, they're probably going to get a lot more applications for these this year, but they don't have the ability to afford to grant more. So likely the number of gap year applications they're going to grant is the same as any other year, and they will have to decide how to deny them because it messes up their economics to be holding spots. And it puts extra pressure on this year's class and on next year's class because they have to fill the gap year spot from the waiting list instead. Because they can't leave the spot open, they need the tuition. And then in the following year, they have to have held that spot for someone from last year instead of giving it to an applicant in the current class. So it's not actually the best backup plan, a gap year. But for some families, just waiting until next year is still going to be the right answer, right? So you have to look at your own situation. Does that make sense? Let's see, let's talk about what backup plans really might look like. So I put together a list of questions that I just want to plant in everybody's mind. And guys, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Your questions, then talk about the thing that I want to talk about, but I need to know what your questions are. So I'll keep talking until we get questions in the chat. So let's talk about what questions you might want to be asking that would give you a backup plan. So let's say you've chosen your school and you're comfortable with the school being a safe place for next year, financially, academically, geographically, and everything else. But you still want to have a backup plan, right? Because like I said, we got to be flexible. We have no idea what it's going to look like in the fall. Since I started these broadcasts, I think on the second broadcast, I showed the slide of the president's survey where they surveyed several hundred college presidents, and more than 70% of those college presidents couldn't predict. They said, we have no idea. They literally said, we have no idea whether we'll be open in the fall or not. They have no idea, right? So if you go to School News Saturday, and you look at the headlines at the very top, the headlines of the week, the big headlines of the week are that Boston University and several other big schools have announced detailed plans for being closed. They haven't announced that they will be closed, but they have announced that they have detailed plans for being closed, and they have their plan B. They are planning for plan B. So plan A is still to be open, but plan B is ready. And that's what we need to do for you and your family, right? And so that means you need to be asking these questions.
So from Shelby, well, I realize there's no crystal ball. Are there any thoughts on whether the fall college admissions applicants will find it more or less competitive than previous years? Further, she asks, will financial aid be more or less generous for fall applicants?
Yeah, okay, those are good questions. They're good enough to stop talking about this. These are the questions to ask. So let's talk about Shelby's two questions, which were number one, are admissions going to be more or less competitive for students who are applying for fall 2021? So students who are applying for fall 2020, you guys have your acceptance letters, you have your financial aid letters, and right now you're just trying to decide which one to take and whether or not you're going to take any of them. So students who are juniors right now are applying for fall of 2021. So fall of 2021 is 8 months away, which doesn't mean you have 18 months. It means you have about 6 months to get your applications done. But 18 months from now, what is fall semester going to look like? And Shelby said I don't have a crystal ball. It's funny because I wrote someone an email, a couple of people emails yesterday saying, my crystal ball is kind of fuzzy, especially that far out. But I can answer your question, Shelby. I can. Whether or not admissions are going to be more competitive. So here's what it's going to look like. Admissions are going to be more competitive in some situations and less competitive in others, which is everybody's least favorite answer, right? It depends. But based on the survey I showed you at the beginning, right, a lot of families are considering staying closer to home, and especially considering in-state tuition as a much more attractive option than it was before. So in-state tuition at a local state school, even a flagship school like University of Nevada, Reno, or University of Texas, Austin, in-state tuition averages less than $20,000 a year. And out-of-state tuition averages 50 or more. And tuition at private schools might average 50, 60, 65. Now that's not necessarily the net price that you pay, it's the sticker price, but you see the point is there's this huge tuition difference between in-state, out-of-state. And given all the uncertainty, a lot of families are saying, wow, that $20,000 price tag looks like a better choice. So for in-state tuition applicants, it's going to be more competitive than it ever has been before, because a way larger percentage of students in Texas, for example, are going to be considering taking the offer. So Texas University's University of Texas at Austin, which is the flagship school of that system, University of Texas at Austin takes every student in Texas who graduated in the top 6% of their class. You're automatically in. So many of those top 6%, some of them go to Yale, and some of them go to Tulane, and some of them go to other state schools in a normal year. But in this year, I think that we can guarantee that many more of those top 6% students are going to take that offer from their state school. And here in Nevada, we have a similar offer from University of Nevada, Reno, and UNLV. They also, not only do they automatically take top students, but in Nevada, we have a very generous scholarship system for in-state students. So if you're a resident of your state and you're doing well, you're going to get a great offer from your in-state school. And this year and also next year, many more families are going to be taking advantage of that. So that means even for in-state residents, the competition is going to be stiffer. So let's say you're a Texas resident, but you're in the top 10% instead of the top 6%. There will be more competition for you. But also, if you're applying out of state to a school, like a student I have this year is considering an offer from is considering an offer from University of Colorado Boulder, which is their flagship school. So he received an offer as an out-of-state student from Colorado's flagship university. He wants to study engineering, and Boulder is a fantastic engineering school. So he got an offer from the engineering school, but it's out-of-state tuition for him. So this is your second question, Shelby. It's out-of-state tuition for him. So he's gotten in, and he has gotten an offer to pay full price, well, close to full price at Boulder. So he could go to the University of Nevada, Reno for $11,000 a year, minus a substantial scholarship, or he could go to the University of Colorado Boulder for $45,000 a year, no scholarship. What is he going to do? Well, in a previous year, I would have advised him to ask for a better financial aid package, right? Those are always negotiable. 100% of the time, you want to call and say, is this the best you can do? Like, as if you were buying a car. So he's going to make that call this year, and he might have some negotiating room this year because schools are so nervous about whether students will show up. But Shelby, you have a student who might be applying for fall of 2021. Competition for in-state tuition or competition for in-state student spots is going to be more competitive. And financial aid is probably also going to be more competitive in those situations. On the other side of the coin is other schools, which are not in-state, right? So private schools, especially liberal arts schools, I've said this, I think, every single week on this broadcast, right? Higher education is an industry that's been in trouble for a decade already. So enrollments are declining because of general demographics. Enrollments are declining because the cost of school is just going through the roof. Enrollments are declining because people are questioning they're just generally questioning the cost of higher education compared to the benefits, which it still pays to get a degree. So many schools have been seeing declining enrollments for a long time. And right now in this current situation, many schools are looking at things because they may not be able to survive the hit of having lower enrollments, of having lower tuition revenue. I talked, I think, on the first or the second broadcast of this show about international students. International students are something like an $80 billion industry. That might not be the right number, but there's an enormous amount of revenue for schools because they pay full tuition. They don't get any help. They don't get federal help. They don't get scholarships. They come and they pay $80,000 a year. And none of them are going to be able to come this year, and probably not the year after that. So many schools who aren't looking at great in-state numbers are worried. So private schools are frankly terrified that students won't come. So those schools may have much less competition, especially this year and probably in the next couple of years. And so if you're an attractive candidate, if your student Shelby is looking at good test scores, she's going to go take that test, right? And she's looking at good test scores and she's got a good transcript and she's a competitive applicant, she may very well have a better chance of getting into a stretch school, as we like to call it, than in years past. And if she's a really competitive applicant, the school may even be making her an attractive offer, because that's what the scholarships are really about for the schools. Schools are trying to build an incoming class that's diverse. They do really care about that, even though I know it's hard to believe sometimes. They're looking for a class that's really diverse, that is diverse socioeconomically, academically, and all different kinds of ways. That they're also looking for students who are going to be really successful at their campus, period. That's what they really want. They want to offer that chair to a student who's going to come, who's going to stay 4 years and pay tuition, not flunk out, right? Who's going to contribute to the student body and make it a great place to be. They care a lot about that, believe it or not. And then who's going to graduate and be successful because they want to be able to say they're doing a good job. So Shelby, if your student is a good candidate, the schools are excited to do whatever they can to get you there. And that's still true even at school, even at the in-state situation. What they're trying to do is get students who are going to be successful to say yes and come and pay. So if making an attractive scholarship offer is what's going to make that happen, then that's what they're going to do. So it depends on the school. And that's, in fact, that's one of the things that we will look at. I'm going to put my calendar back up again. So that's one of the things that we can look at together if you set up a time and we do an audit of the schools you're thinking about. Is we can look at, is the school you're looking at more likely to be that in-state situation, which is going to be much more competitive maybe, or is there a school you can look at where competition might be different? I'll just say different. And you might have an advantage in some way because you're a highly attractive student. And so financial aid, one of the things that I put up on my what will you do slide was, what will you do if your financial aid package changes in the second year? So those ugly what if scenarios are important things to think about, because school might make a great offer and then they might not be able to offer it to you the next year because the economics of that campus are going to be in so much flux. So you've got to kind of be prepared that this essentially scholarship package might actually be too good to be true in your junior year. But I think that schools are going to do everything they can. That will be their last ditch It'll be their last choice, right? They're gonna make budget cuts. They're gonna do hiring freezes. They might even furlough professors. They're gonna do everything else before they do that to families. I just think it's important to ask yourself, what would you do, right? Do you have a plan in place if something like one of those things happens? How'd I do? Did I answer your question at all? So I have this address up. I'm going to put a couple others. I'm going to switch the slide in a second. Like I said, I really do encourage you guys to schedule time. It's really easy for me to look at the profile of the schools you're considering and help you do an audit. It's really hard, I think, for families to know what to look at. So if you will schedule time, we'll look at your schools. And I have time this week set aside that's held open on that calendar for you guys. Yeah, you guys are all unmuted because we're coming up on 11 o'clock and I want to be respectful of people's time. We start on time. We tend to end on time, but I hang out for a little while after every one of these if you have more questions. So I think this address is guy up for you so you can see that address where we have all the resources down at the bottom. And I'm going to shut up and let you guys ask questions if you have some or put them in the chat. I'm gonna drink my coffee.
Shelley has transfer student too. Do you sessions for transfers as well?
Oh yeah, transfer applications are a special case. You have to, we look at things a little bit differently for a transfer student. Shelley, where is your student and where is she considering transferring? If you can tell me a little bit about it and everybody can hear kind of what that sounds like.
So my transfer student is in the Bay Area, West Valley Community College, and she'll also be applying in the fall. She's looking at, she would love to go on the East Coast to Boston. And then she's got some safety schools too. And, UCs would also be like she can tag to a couple of UCs. So those would also be a choice, but those are just, safety schools. But ideally she'd like to go to Boston.
Boston College or Boston University?
Actually, she's looking at Northeastern or Emerson would be her top choices.
Wow, but that's really quite a range actually. What does she study?
Well, those two schools, Emerson and Northeastern, they have business majors that are like kind of on the creative side, like business for creative enterprise at Emerson, which is, she didn't want to do like a straight business major, wanted to add she's really creative and into music and film, so she wanted to do that. Northeastern has something similar to, I can't think of the exact major, but it's like business with music technology or something like that.
Gotcha. So I was smiling big because I considered Emerson myself when I was. It's a really neat school. It's a smaller liberal arts kind of school, which offers all kinds of amazing benefits for students that get overlooked today because we're so focused on the cost benefit analysis and whether we're going to get a return on investment for college. That liberal arts schools sometimes come up short in that way, but gosh, being at a liberal arts college offers so many amazing lifelong benefits. So I smile because I wish that everybody could afford to have the chance to take the time. So Emerson's a great school. Now I'll also say, I was also smiling because 2 weeks ago I was listening to one of the vice presidents for Northeastern talking about this enrollment crisis. And he just was nailing all the stuff, talking about how Northeastern has their ducks in a row financially and how the campus is really well prepared to handle this, to weather this situation. And they have really great online infrastructure already, which is, I talked about that being important. So Northeastern is also a great place right now. They're well positioned. But your question is about how to be a transfer student applicant. So, and interestingly, she's specifically doing business. So there's some things to really consider about being a business transfer student. So business programs, at many schools, they're a special admission category. So you don't just apply to Emerson, for example, but you apply to Emerson and you apply specifically into the business program. That would be true for students applying as freshmen and also true for students applying as transfers. So many schools, there's two different models. They'll either admit you as a freshman to general studies, and then at the end of your freshman or sophomore year, depending, then you apply into the business program. And then other schools, you apply into the business program as a freshman. So they're separate admissions. So you might get into the University of Texas, Austin, but you do not get into the School of Business, and you are not admitted, or you are invited to reapply at the end of your freshman year. So they're separate. So as a transfer student, because she's going to be coming in with probably 30 credits, maybe not, maybe 15 credits, I don't know. She's going to need to apply directly to the business programs, most likely. And so she's going to need to be qualified. So they're going to be looking at her grades in her math classes really closely, and in the, well, mainly math classes for business. Some people would say science for some other things. So that's going to be really important. How are her grades in her math classes at the community college? And you might not know the answer to that, right? But if you do, it'd be good to hear. They're going to be looking at those things really specifically. So transfer students are looked at a little bit differently. Her test scores are going to matter less.
3.6 is GPA.
3.6 GPA, I hear. Well, that's great. That's in the range that we would want to see it be. So that's actually going to be more important than the SAT score she had before, because that's the most recent thing. So they're going to be looking at her, what classes she's taken that are relevant, and how did she do in them. I don't remember the name of the community college, but it might be, we could look at what she's doing and talk about her contacting. So for example, I would be recommending that she ask for recommendation letters from those professors at the community college. Those kinds of things will matter a lot. And they really will matter a lot at a school like Emerson, in fact. So the basic general rules still apply. They're looking at numbers first, and then specifically at her choices. And so that's true for, that's what we say about all of them, right? They're looking first at your numbers and then at your choices. So are your scores great? Are your grades great? And then what did you get great grades in, right? Did you get great grades in swimming lessons, or did you get great grades in calculus? And so that's what they'll be looking at for her specifically. What else? I see it blinking. So I think that means we have more questions. Yeah, I think we might be ready to go. I'm gonna hold because I know we've got Shelly's microphone is, Shelly, you're unmuted. So I'm wondering if you're waiting for a chance to get a word in edgewise. Okay. Well, guys, it's 11:07, so we're 7 minutes over, and I'll just put my address back up there. If I didn't answer your question or you want to know more, this is how you do it. Just go here. But if you book yourself on that calendar, we'll be talking on the phone really soon, which will be lots of fun. So I guess I'm going to sign off. I just remembered that we've been broadcasting across Facebook all this time. It's a good thing I forget that, because otherwise I'd be like freaked out about it. I don't know. So, well, thank you guys so much for your time. And we're going to sign off here, and we'll see you next week at the same bat channel. All right. Have a great day, you guys. Bye-bye.